Sunday morning dawned quietly. The storm had passed, leaving behind soft puddles on the sidewalks and a sky still tinged with gray clouds. The world outside Rachel's house felt washed clean, fresh, and new. Inside, however, the air was thick, with unspoken emotions and tentative hope. Rachel woke early, her mind still restless from the night before. She felt the warmth of the candlelight from yesterday lingering somewhere inside her. An ache she wasn't ready to name but knew was growing. Downstairs, Dylan was already up, quietly making his way into the kitchen. Rachel found herself watching him from the top of the stairs for a moment, surprised again at how much he had changed, not just in looks, but in presence. There was a calmness in him now, a maturity that hadn't been there when he was a boy. He looked up and caught her watching. A small, shy smile curved his lips. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," Rachel replied, smoothing her hair back. "Want some breakfast?" "I'm making pancakes again." He nodded, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table as Rachel moved around the kitchen, flipping pancakes. The easy rhythm of the morning made her relax a little. Dylan's quiet presence was comforting, and for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt the weight on her chest lighten just a bit. They ate breakfast slowly, laughing over burnt edges and syrup spills. "So," Dylan said, wiping his mouth with a napkin, "what's the plan today?" Rachel shrugged. "No plan, really. Just take it easy. Maybe a walk if it clears up." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. After cleaning up, they settled in the living room to watch an old movie one Rachel had loved since she was young. Dylan sat close, the soft couch between them. The room was calm and quiet except for the soft sounds. From the TV, Rachel felt a strange warmth sitting there beside him. The easy companionship they shared growing into something tender and fragile. Then, during a quiet moment between scenes, Rachel made a joke, something silly about the ridiculous plot of the movie. Dylan laughed, the sound low and genuine. Their eyes met, and suddenly, everything shifted. He looked at her differently now, like he was seeing her for the first time. The flicker of candlelight caught in his eyes. And Rachel felt a tremor. She couldn't explain. "I used to have a crush on you," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she thought she must have misheard. "Dylan," she started, trying to keep her voice steady. He held up a hand, stopping her gently. "I know it sounds crazy," he said. "But it's true. Not just when I was a kid either. I still feel it." Rachel's heart pounded loudly in her ears. She forced a small smile, feeling a mixture of warmth and confusion. "That's sweet of you to say." He smiled back, but there was something serious in his eyes. "I don't want to make things weird," said, "but I needed to be honest." She stood up suddenly, the room feeling suddenly smaller, suffocating even. "Dylan," she said carefully, "you should pack your things. Your mom will be here soon." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. He looked down, nodding slowly. Neither of them said more. Rachel left the room and closed the door behind her, pressing her back against it. Her heart was racing, part fear, part something else she didn't want to admit. What had just happened? Had she imagined it? No. His words echoed in her mind, and so did her feelings. So did her feelings she had buried deep for years. She tried to think logically. He was young, just barely an adult. She was older. She had her own complicated past, her own rules. This was a line that shouldn't be crossed, but her heart rebelled. She walked to the window and stared out, trying to steady her breath. What did it mean? Could she allow herself to feel this way? Was it even possible to care like this for someone so close to her? Friends, family. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away. When Dylan came out to gather his things, she helped quietly, neither one meeting the other's eyes. The air between them was heavy with everything left unsaid. As he zipped his bag, he looked up at her. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward," he said softly. She smiled, though it was bittersweet. "No, Dylan, I'm glad you were honest." He nodded and gave her a small, tentative smile. When the doorbell rang, Signaling Melissa's arrival, Rachel felt a strange ache in her chest. She opened the door for her friend. It was tired but grateful. "Thanks so much for watching him," Melissa said, hugging Rachel briefly. Rachel nodded. "Anytime." As Melissa and Dylan stepped outside, Rachel caught Dylan's gaze one last time. His eyes searched hers, full of something that words couldn't capture. Then he was gone. The house felt emptier than before. Rachel closed the door, slowly leaning against it once more. She went to her bedroom and sat on the edge of her bed, holding the note Dylan had left on the kitchen counter. "Rachel, I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I just needed you to know that someone sees you not as someone's friend, but as someone worth falling for. D." She read the note again, her fingers trembling. Her heart ached with longing and regret. What had started as a quiet weekend had become something far more complicated. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she couldn't forget this moment. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something neither of them expected but both had secretly hoped for. The sun had set hours ago, but Rachel sat by the window, watching the trees sway softly in the evening breeze. House was quiet now, empty in a way that felt both peaceful and aching. The weekend had ended, but the emotions it stirred were still very much alive inside her. Melissa had taken Dylan home earlier that evening. The goodbye had been brief, polite on the surface. But beneath it all was a fragile thread of something unspoken, a secret shared between Rachel and her friend's son. Rachel had tried to act normal, to smile and chat with Melissa as if nothing had shifted. But inside, her heart was heavy with the weight of what had happened, the confession. The longing, the tender ache that refused to be ignored after Melissa left. Rachel wandered to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. The amber liquid caught the light, swirling like the emotions inside her warm complex. And a little intoxicating dot. She sat down at the table and stared at the note Dylan had left behind. "Rachel, I'm sorry if I crossed a line. I just needed you to know that someone sees you not as someone's friend, but as someone worth falling for." D. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper, the simple words carrying a weight she hadn't expected. It was strange, she thought, the way a few words on a piece of paper could unravel years of carefully guarded feelings. Rachel took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about the weekend, the way Dylan looked at her, the way her heart had fluttered with a mix of fear and something else, something hopeful. She wondered if he felt it too. That strange pull between them that seemed both impossible and undeniable. The truth was, Rachel had felt lonely for a long time. Since her divorce 3 years ago, the silence of her house had grown louder. The nights had stretched endlessly, and the emptiness had settled deep into her bones. And yet, in the presence of Dylan, she had felt something awaken, a warmth, a connection, quiet promise that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. But the world was complicated. They were complicated. She was an adult with years of experience, scars, and memories. He was young, still finding his way. Could those lines ever blur? Could love grow in the spaces between friendship and family? Rachel didn't have answers. She folded the note carefully and placed it on the counter. Then she stood and walked to her bedroom. The house feeling impossibly large. That night, sleep was elusive. Her mind replayed the weekend, the laughter, the candlelight. The quiet moments shared between two people who had known each other forever but were suddenly seeing each other anew. She thought about Dylan's words, the honesty in his eyes, the gentle way he had reached out to her. And she thought about herself, part of her that longed to be seen, to be held, to be loved. Morning came slowly, light filtering through the curtains. Rachel lay in bed, the memories of the weekend fresh in her mind. She knew this was a turning point, a moment that could change everything if she let it. But fear held her back. Fear of judgment, of losing a friendship, of crossing a line that should never be crossed. She sighed and closed her eyes, Maybe time would tell. Maybe the feelings would fade. Or maybe they would grow into something beautiful, something unexpected and rare. For now, all she could do was hold on to the quiet hope that had taken root in her heart and wait. Rachel had always liked the sound of rain. There was something comforting about it, the steady tapping against the windows, the way it softened the world outside. It made her quiet house in the Oregon suburbs feel even quieter, almost like a secret tucked away from the noise of life. She glanced at the clock, nearly 4 p.m. Any moment now. She moved through the kitchen with that nervous energy that sneaks in before company arrives. Not that she had much to worry about. Her guest wasn't. Someone she needed to impress her at least. He shouldn't have been Dot. It was Dylan, Melissa's son, 18 years old. Just started college. He was staying for the weekend while his parents flew to Chicago for a family emergency. Melissa had called 2 nights ago, apologizing, explaining that they didn't have time to find a proper sitter or, rather, a temporary adult presence to keep an eye on him while he was back in town for a few days. "Can he crash at your place?" Melissa had asked, her voice a little rushed. "You're closest, and you know Dylan, he always liked being at your house." Of course. Rachel said yes. How could she not? But now, as she wiped invisible dust from the kitchen counter for the third time, she felt something odd, something she didn't fully understand. The doorbell rang. She took a breath, smoothing down her sweater, and walked to the door. When she opened it, the first thing she noticed was how tall he'd gotten. "Hey, Aunt Rachel," Dylan said with a crooked smile, rain dripping from the hood of his jacket. His voice was deeper, narrow, and warm. That familiar nickname fell from his lips easily, though they were never really related. It had just stuck over the years. She looked at him, really looked. He had his mother's eyes, but the rest of him had changed. Broader shoulders, a stronger jawline, quiet confidence in the way he stood. He was no longer the boy who used to run barefoot through her backyard. Rachel blinked, startled by the thought. "You're soaked," she said quickly, stepping aside. "Come in." "Yeah, the Uber dropped me off a block early," he said, laughing a little. Didn't want to make the driver wait in the mud. He dropped his duffel bag by the door and pulled off his jacket. Rachel watched as he brushed water from his hair with his hand, revealing those thoughtful eyes again as that lingered on her for just a second too long. "You really have grown up," she said, instantly regretting how cliché it sounded. He smiled anyway. "So have you." She laughed softly. "Not sure that's how aging works." They moved into the living room. Rachel offered him a towel, and he sat down on the couch she'd had since her early 30s. The same one Dylan used to curl up on when he and Melissa would visit for dinner or holidays. Back then, he'd been all knees and elbows, awkward and shy. Now he sat with a kind of ease that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "So, how's college?" she asked, trying to steer her thoughts elsewhere. "It's fine," he said, shrugging, a little overwhelming. "A lot of people pretending to have it all figured out." She nodded. "That doesn't really stop, you know?" He chuckled, meeting her eyes. "That's what I figured." There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable one, just long enough to feel intentional. Rachel stood. "I made a casserole earlier. You hungry? Starving?" She retreated to the kitchen, trying to focus on plating the food instead of the strange fluttering in her chest. "It was nothing. It's just a quiet weekend. It's just someone staying over." She was being silly Dot still as she set the table. She caught herself smoothing her hair in the reflection of the microwave. Dot. "Why?" Dinner was simple chicken, green beans, a bottle of wine just for her. They ate slowly, catching up on small things. Dylan had a way of asking questions that made her feel like he was truly listening. "So, what about you?" he asked after clearing his plate. "Still working from home?" "Yep, freelance design." "I like the quiet. You always seemed to." Rachel tilted her head. "You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things about this house," he said. "The way it smells, the creak in the floor near the bathroom, always humming in the kitchen." His eyes held hers again steadily this time. She felt her face flush. After dinner, they watched a movie together, something light and old. Rachel sat on one end of the couch, Dylan on the other, but the room still felt full. Their laughter came easily. So did the silence between scenes. By the time the credits rolled, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and the world outside the window was wrapped in gray. Rachel stretched, suddenly tired. "I'll get your room ready," she said, standing. "Fresh sheets and everything." He looked up at her. "Thanks, Rachel, for letting me stay." His voice was quiet, sincere. She paused. Something warm settled in her chest, just beneath her ribs. "Of course," she said softly. "You're always welcome here." She turned away quickly, not trusting the way her heart was beating. Later that night, after she heard his door close down the hall, Rachel sat in bed staring at the ceiling. Her room felt too quiet, too still. Outside, the rain began again, gently, tapping the windows like it had something to say. He was just a guest, a young man she'd known forever. But something had shifted that evening, subtle but undeniable, not just in how he looked at her, but in how she felt being seen. Rachel pulled the covers up and turned out the light. She didn't expect anything to happen that weekend, but deep inside, in the quiet part of her heart she rarely listened to, she sensed something coming, something she wasn't ready for, something she didn't know how to stop. Saturday morning arrived soft and quiet. The rain from the night before still clung to the trees and sidewalks outside Rachel's house. But inside, the kitchen smelled warm and inviting fresh coffee, toasted bread, and a faint hint of cinnamon from the candles she'd lit. Rachel was already up, moving gently through the house, aware of the peacefulness the weekend had brought. She smiled to herself as she heard the creak of Dylan's bedroom door down the hall. He was up too. She hoped this weekend would be easy for both of them. When Dylan appeared in the kitchen, he was still wearing the same hoodie from yesterday, though dry now. His hair was tousled from sleep, and his eyes held that thoughtful look Rachel had noticed the day before. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning." Rachel replied, handing him a cup of coffee. "You want some breakfast? I'm making pancakes." He nodded, sitting down at the small kitchen table by the window. As Rachel flipped the pancakes, Dylan watched the rain outside. "You know," he said after a moment, "I used to love staying here when I was little. It always felt like a safe place, like nothing bad could happen." Rachel's heart warmed. "I'm glad. You're still welcome anytime." He smiled faintly, and for a moment they just looked at each other, two people bound by years of friendship, yet now feeling a subtle shift in the air. They ate slowly, talking about Dylan's first semester in college, his classes, and how hard it was to find a balance between freedom and responsibility. "You ever feel like you're just pretending to be okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Rachel paused. The question wasn't easy. It was the kind of question you only asked someone you trusted, or someone who trusted you enough to be honest. "More often than I'd like to admit," she said. "Life has a way of making you put on a brave face, even when you feel anything but brave." Dylan nodded thoughtfully. They spent the morning wandering through old memories, talking about Melissa, about Dylan's childhood and the small moments that stitched their lives together. After lunch, the rain started again, a gentle but persistent drizzle that made the world outside blur into shades of gray and green. Rachel suggested they light some candles to chase the gloom away. They sat in the living room, the flickering candlelight casting warm shadows on the walls. The power flickered once, then went out completely, plunging the house into a cozy darkness. Broken only by the golden glow, Rachel reached for a blanket and draped it over Dylan's shoulders. "It's like a scene from an old movie," she said. Softly, he smiled at her, eyes bright in the candlelight. For a while, they didn't talk much. The silence was easy-comfortable. Then Dylan shifted closer, his voice low. "You've always been different, Rachel." She looked at him, puzzled. "Not like other people. You listen, you see things others miss. You make people feel safe." Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you," she said quietly. He hesitated before continuing. I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I was younger, I looked up to you. It's more than just a friend to my mom." Rachel's heart skipped. She forced herself to smile. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "You were kind, patient. You made me feel like I mattered." The words filled the room with something electric and tender. Rachel's throat tightened. She remembered the years when she had quietly hoped for something more, though she never allowed herself to imagine it could happen. "Dylan," she said gently, "you're growing into a remarkable young man." He looked up, eyes meeting hers, and, "You're amazing, Rachel. Not just because of who you are, but because of how you make others feel." She swallowed hard, feeling a flutter deep inside. The distance between them shrank just a little. Rachel knew she should remind herself of the lines, friend. Friend's son, age difference, but her heart refused to listen. Instead, she found herself leaning in slightly, drawn to the warmth of his presence. They talked late into the night, voices hushed, sharing stories of heartbreak, dreams, and the fear of being alone.